That's where 60% of the world's cacao comes from. Those plantations are monocrop plantations that have been clear cut, and they planted cacao trees 50 years ago, 60 years ago. And now with the change in climate, where you have so much extremes, you have extreme drought for 4 months, 5 months. Then you'll have extreme rainfall for 3 months. Neither one of those are good for cacao plants. And so the yield coming out of Africa in 2023 was down almost 30%, which means that the world's supply was down almost 20%. And when that happened, not only did the prices go up because of supply and demand, but speculators started getting into the market and traders got into the market, driving the prices even higher.
Welcome to Sustainability Transformations podcast, where we explore bold ideas to drive positive change for people, the community, and business. And today's guest is a regenerative leader, food innovator, and ethical CEO. Bearden leads Alter Eco, a trailblazing chocolate brand that proves sustainability can scale profitably. From navigating the cocoa supply volatility to pioneering regenerative farming practices, Keith's story is one of bold transformation for people, planet, and food economy. Goal of our discussion is exploring how those being into business, regeneration, resilience, and the chocolate economy. Keith, thank you for joining us. What drew you personally to the intersection of chocolate, climate, and commerce?
First of all, thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here. It really wasn't a planned journey of mine to be in the regenerative food space. But having said that, I grew up on a farm. We still have a family farm in Tennessee, and it's been in my family since the mid 1800s. So it's been handed down through the generations. And I started my career in IT, but then went from that into opening my own consulting business in Portland, Oregon, in the Pacific Northwest. And a lot of companies, a lot of entrepreneurial companies in the Pacific Northwest were food and beverage companies, tremendous amount of them. And so I happened to have a number of clients that were in the food and beverage space, and that kind of brought me full circle back to where I grew up and looking at how farming was done around the world. And this was in 2004, so more than 20 years ago, and started seeing that there were companies that were really making a difference. And those were companies that were dedicated to, at the time, really organic production, non-GMO products and ingredients. And then I had the opportunity to take over as the international CEO for a tea company called Yogi Tea. Yogi Tea certified organic, non-GMO, fair trade. And that really drew me into that world. And having been involved in that and actually going out and working with farmers to actually grow products for our ingredients, again, full circle back to the way I grew up, of growing everything on our farm that we would sit down at dinner, and pretty much everything on the table came from our farm. So I had the opportunity to join the board of Alter Eco. And Alter Eco was really founded with those principles of restoring ecosystems, improving livelihoods, and reducing waste. Those are the three core principles of the company. And so being part of the board and part of that organization, I really tried to push those principles through every decision we were making. And then in 2023, I had the opportunity to take over the company as the CEO, and every decision we make, we come back to those core principles of how can we restore ecosystem, improve livelihoods, and reduce waste. Or we sum it up by saying, let's leave the planet better than when we found it.
That's a very impressive personal story. So what's the story behind Alter Eco and your vision when you stepped into the CEO role?
So when Alter Eco was founded, a couple of French guys founded the company with the intent of bringing products that were coming out of the Latin American regions, Ecuador, Peru, Dominican Republic, bringing them into the U.S. market in a way that supported the farmers there. That was the really driving force of bringing products like quinoa, for example, and chocolate and other products into the U.S. market was to find a way to deliver not only a high quality product, but support those farmers. And so they maintained that discipline of working directly with the farmers to reduce climate impact, reduce emissions. And when I got involved, the core principles were still being followed, but my goal was to scale it into a much larger company while still maintaining those core principles. And that's not always easy to do. It's not always easy to find additional streams of ingredient supply chain, and scale in a way that supports the mission of regenerative agriculture. Or we actually, in the cacao industry, we don't really talk a lot about regenerative agriculture. We talk about dynamic agroforestry, because cacao plants actually grow in the forest. And it's not like an annual crop like oats or rice or wheat, where you're harvesting the crop and then you're planting a cover crop to restore the soil. And the cacao plants they're perennials. They grow for 50, 60, 70 years. And so the goal is to build an ecosystem around them with other either cash producing crops like plantains or coconuts or bananas or avocados, or just timber trees to provide shade and protection for the plants, as well as the deep roots of those trees pull up more groundwater when there's times of drought. So my goal was to try to continue the growth of the company, and my goal still is to try to continue the growth of the company, open up new markets and new channels, while still maintaining the integrity of everything that the brand stands for.
Yeah, that's impressive. So, regeneration in agriculture is more than a buzzword at Alter Eco, but for the benefit of the listeners, what does it tangibly look like on the ground?
So we actually support farmers in the regions where we harvest from. So whether that be Dominican Republic or Ecuador, we support them in a number of different ways. One is we actually provide income to them in a manner of wage, so that they understand all of our chocolate products are Fair for Life certified. So that's a higher wage than even fair trade. And so we give them the tools both in income, in training, and then we actually send money to these regions to help them buy seedlings for other plants. So we're working on a project right now in Dominican Republic where we're actually supplying coconut trees to the cacao farmers, because coconuts are in high demand in Dominican Republic. And so by providing those coconut trees, in 3 to 5 years, those coconut trees will mature and be able to produce, gives them another source of income, and it gives us shade and all for the cacao plants.
Within the sustainability space, certainly, regeneration conversation has been coming up. Can you walk us through how that regenerative cacao farming supports both biodiversity and the farmer livelihoods? I know you mentioned about the coconut tree, but perhaps you can explore further on that.
Yeah, so I mean, I was just in Ecuador a few months ago and met with one of our farmers that we've been working with for almost 20 years. And they had a table laid out that showed all of the plants and crops that come off of their farm. And there were plantains, there was little small baby bananas, which are delicious, by the way, little organic baby bananas, avocados, guavas. Of course, cacao pods were the center of it because that's their biggest cash crop. Limes, passion fruit off of passion fruit vines. So all of those things were within their ecosystem now. And when they started that conversion process 7 or 8 years ago, the only thing that they were harvesting off their land was cacao plants. And they're still in process of converting all of their acreage to that type of ecosystem. So it's a little bit at a time. We've converted about 570 acres of farms to a regenerative or dynamic agroforestry system. And that's continued. I mean, we continue to support that year over year. We publish what we call our Regen report, and our report will actually be coming out next week for 2024. And we measure how much of our cacao beans actually came from farms that are practicing regenerative agriculture or dynamic agroforestry. And we report that. We're not at 100% yet. That's our goal, but
Yeah.
we're at about 75% right now. And that's a big improvement every year. We're making improvements of 3, 4, 5% every year with the goal of getting to 100%.
I always say sustainability is a journey and not a destination. And like most journey, as long as progress is being made and not allowing perfection be in the way of making progress. So that's impressive to know. And yeah, I think I'll be interested to explore when the report comes out. You've shared that you exploring working with those farmer communities more like a partnership model. How do you ensure these are tangible, perhaps if I use the word fair, compared to other uh, competitors? Or
Well, I mean, one of the things is we visit the farmers directly and we work with them directly. And we ask, we engage them in brainstorming of what do they need? What tools do they need? What education and training do they need? And what plants are performing better and what are the best results for them from a financial perspective. We've worked with most of these farmer cooperatives that we buy from for 10, 15, even some cases 20 years. Alter Eco's been around for a little more than 20 years. And, it's interesting if you look at the cacao market in 2024, it skyrocketed. It went from $3,538 a ton for cacao beans to over $12,000 a ton for cacao beans in a
wow.
matter of 4 months. That was largely driven by the fact that a lot of the cacao market is supplied by the Western Cape of Africa, Ivory Coast, Ghana. That's where 60% of the world's cacao comes from. Those plantations are monocrop plantations that have been clear cut, and they planted cacao trees 50 years ago, 60 years ago. And now with the change in climate, where you have so much extremes. You have extreme drought for 4 months, 5 months. Then you'll have extreme rainfall for 3 months. Neither one of those are good for cacao plants. And so the yield coming out of Africa in 2023 was down almost 30%, which means that the world's supply was down almost 20%. And when that happened, not only did the prices go up because of supply and demand, but speculators started getting into the market and traders got into the market, driving the prices even higher. So our farmers, they're dedicated to us, thank goodness. They're loyal because they could have gone out on the open market and sold their beans, when those prices were skyrocketing. But cacao's a commodity, just like oil, just like coffee, things that go up eventually come back down. And they want to maintain those relationships. They're proud of the relationships they have with Alter Eco. But we also want to make sure that they get a wage that's appropriate. Our price of cacao went up over 4 times last year, what we were paying in 2023. So the market is really, the price of a chocolate bar has really escalated a lot in the last 18 months.
Normally, I will introduce. So, I currently live in the UK, but I grew up in Ghana, so very familiar with those farming community, with those. But I didn't realize that those high prices were due to the climate change. That's one area for me to explore. So, how has the Alter Eco adapted to the cacao price, the volatility as you shared, and those supply chain? Is it based on the direct, relationship, or have you implemented other strategies as well?
Yeah, a number of different strategies, but the beauty of our relationships are that they're a direct relationship and those farmers are committed to us. So a lot of chocolate companies have worried about just getting supply, because once the traders get in, then the prices skyrocket and then you can't necessarily even get the amount that you need. And there've been a number of companies that have gone out of business as a result of that here in the US. We're a little bit unique as well in that we are a bean to bar company. So we buy the beans and then process them ourselves, or our Swiss partner, our Swiss manufacturing partner. All of our chocolates are manufactured in Switzerland. So they're some of the highest quality you can find on the market. So we have a very specific configuration of our recipes and very specific beans that we use and we know come from. So the transparency is very easy for us. And then we roast and process, conch, temper, process all the way to the finished goods. A lot of chocolate companies buy what's called couverture, which is after it's already been roasted and processed, and it's in a block, and then you remelt it and you pour it into a bar mold and you sell chocolate. There's nothing wrong with that. You just don't have as much control over your supply chain when you do that.
Yeah.
And so we have control over our supply chain all the way back to the farm. Like I said, we know where those beans come from. Fortunately, with our partner in Switzerland, we pre-finance the beans with the farmers. And so we give them the advantage of having the money up front. And so they don't have to worry about the volatility of pricing throughout the year. And that gives them some loyalty to us as well, for sure. And then that gives us the ability to manage our prices. Now, we still had to do a very significant price increase. And we did one last year, and we're doing another one this year. It's just the market is such that cacao prices are staying high. Everybody thought they might come back down when the crop came in for 2024, because the crop cycle starts in like September, October timeframe and runs through, February, March, April timeframe for the main part of the crop because it's in the southern hemisphere. But they didn't come back down. Even though the crop was better this year, they didn't come back down. So they're still trading at around, it came down a little bit, but they're still 3 times what they were in 2023.
Around preservation of the harvested cow from the farmers all the way through to the final container or the bag and everything. I'm curious to know, is it predominantly drying or it's a combination of drying and other preservation processes?
So when the beans are harvested, the first thing you do is you ferment them. And then as they're fermented, that creates the real flavor profile. And then they go into a drying process. And then once they're dried, that's how they're shipped out of the growing regions. So you ship them in bags, usually 25 to 50 kilo bags of dried cacao beans. And then it follows the process of kind of like coffee would, but there's a lot more to making a chocolate bar than there is roasting coffee. You roast them just like you would coffee beans, same kind of roaster. And then the only thing that's really used in the process of making a chocolate bar is what's called the nib, the cacao nib, which is inside of the beans. So you pop the beans open, take out the nib, and that's where the magic starts to happen.
Right.
You turn that nib into a paste, and then you add cocoa butter and different things into the process, and then your inclusions. If you're like if it's a raspberry chocolate or an almond chocolate, start to add those inclusions in, and you blend to a specific. We only do dark chocolate, so our chocolates we have one that's 100% total. It's called Total Blackout, 100% cacao, and it's actually our best seller in the United States, believe it or not. It's not bitter at all. And the reason it's not bitter is because of the process we use in making it. There's a step in manufacturing chocolate called conching, and that's when you're turning the nibs into the paste. And it allows for the volatiles, the acids and whatnot, and specifically the aromas to escape when you're processing it like that. The longer you process it, the more of the bad aroma and the acidic taste, the more of it you get out. And we run ours for a really, really, really long time, usually like 10 times longer than most other brands do.
Right.
It
Yeah,
gives
that's
you a smooth tasting 100% cacao bar.
wow, that's interesting to see the whole process. What can other companies, it might not be in the cacao industry, but it might be coffee or other value chain, how can they learn from this transparency or dealing directly with the source, which provides the opportunity to help or be in partnership with them?
But it's interesting because not all brands obviously can go all the way back to the source. They don't have the resources to do that. But even if they're buying semi-finished goods, you can still support the farmers by having your suppliers, your traders that you're buying from, give you some visibility and transparency into where the products are coming from. It's a challenge. I mean, there's no question about it. But at the end of the day, the consumers are the ones that have to drive the brands to do it. So as a consumer, if you pick up, I tell people all the time, you buy an Alter Eco bar, you're improving the planet one chocolate bar at a time. And if they truly believe that, but first of all, it has to taste good. I mean, people buy chocolate because it tastes good. And our chocolates, like I said, are made in Switzerland. They're some of the best tasting products on the market. I'll challenge them. I'll put them up against anybody else's out there. But once it tastes good, then if you realize, oh, well, this is helping to support regenerative agriculture, dynamic agroforestry, it's reducing carbon emissions because those trees are pulling in more carbon than they're emitting. It's paying a living wage to the farmers. Oh, and by the way, all of Alter Eco's chocolates come in compostable packaging. We manufacture a truffle that is a little bitty truffle, and I should grab one and show you, but it's in a backyard compostable wrapper. You can throw it out in your garden and it'll compost.
Mm,
There's no other company in the world that does that. And that's because it's expensive to do, but
mm,
our commitment to the planet and to our DNA is that those are the kinds of things we're going to do.
yeah.
And our loyal consumers believe in it because we sell about 20 million of those truffles a year.
That's impressive. I'm so glad you mentioned that ultimately, yes, environmentally friendly, but the taste has to be good. And I think from my experience talking to startups, especially where they, not all of them, but just highlighting that point that sustainable companies ultimately have to be able to deliver a good product. And then you can go to the consumer or the customer and say, hey, here is a very good product. And by the way, it's even more environmentally friendly than your competitors or environment friendly than what you are used to, if I may use that term. And I'm so glad you've explained it in a very perfect live scenario. So it really helps.
Told my product development teams and my R&D teams for years, taste is the price of admission. You don't get in the door if you don't taste good. You might get in the door one time, but you won't be invited back the second time. So,
Yeah.
yeah, we work very, very hard on making sure our taste profiles are the best in the industry, and we compare ourselves against our competition. There's some great brands out there that also taste good.
Yeah.
I would say we do more in terms of our commitment to sustainability and transparency than most of them do. We're a B Corp certified company. We're climate neutral. We're plastic neutral. We're organic. We're Fair for Life certified. We're non-GMO. I mean, our packaging is certified by the TUV in Austria as backyard compostable. I mean, we try to do everything the right way.
That's impressive, especially the B core. Perhaps you can spend some few seconds to explore that, how time involved
We
it
just
is.
completed our audit. So you could talk to my sustainability officer and she would tell you how much time it takes. No, it's a very thorough and transparent process, which we're happy to go through because we want to be transparent in everything we're doing. My marketing director tells me that we have to show our receipts, tell everybody what we're doing and where we came from. B Corp forces that. B Corp forces you to lay out, that you're paying fair wages to your employees, that I, as the CEO, don't make 50 times what my other employees make, and things like that. So they look at your wages, they look at your relationships with your customers, they look at your marketing materials, they look very deep at your supply chain and that you're paying the people in your supply chain fair wages. It's quite an extensive process. It's about, I would say, our sustainability officers she probably spent full time for about 3 weeks just to complete the questionnaires, not to mention then going through them with the auditors. And the auditors have been assigned now. So we're in the middle of it right now. And it's a very extensive process. Thank goodness we only have to do it once every 3 years.
Very impressive. And in the UK, B Corp is well respected and clearly
We've
it's impressive.
Alter Eco's been B Corp certified since 2009. We were one of the first companies in the US to obtain B Corp certification.
You've already shared the packaging example, which is more environmental friendly, but are there any other circular economy innovations that you are not perhaps doing now, but maybe exploring as well, that you could share?
Yeah, we're constantly looking for ways to cut our emissions overall. And one of the things we did in 2024 was, as I mentioned earlier, all of our chocolates are manufactured in Switzerland. And the company was originally founded in California. So they were bringing the chocolates all the way through the Panama Canal to California. And then 60% of our sales are on the East Coast. So they were trucking them by truck across the United States to deliver to our retailers. So I moved our logistics to Columbus, Ohio, right in the center of the country. And so now our product only moves 10 miles by truck to get to our warehouse. It gets put on a barge in Switzerland, goes up the Rhine River to Antwerp, Belgium, gets put on a boat, comes to Norfolk, Virginia, gets put on a train, and goes to Columbus, Ohio. So we reduced our carbon emissions on transportation by over 54% last year,
Wow, just by that
just by that move.
strategic move. Wow.
So we're constantly looking for ways to improve everything we do. We have a line of granola as well. So we manufacture granola, and it is in a plastic bag. We purchase plastic. We partner with a group called Repurpose, and we collect plastics out of the environment. So we pay to have plastics harvested, especially in hot zone areas like Vietnam, Cambodia, India, some of those areas where there's a lot of plastic pollution. But our goal is to get a compostable bag for our granola as well. Right now, it doesn't provide the product integrity that we're looking for, and it reduces the shelf life. Our granola doesn't have any added sugar. We sweeten it with fruit, and fruit can go rancid a little bit quicker than sugar will. So we need that barrier protection of the environment to give the data or give the product a little bit longer shelf life and better integrity.
In terms of tools, are you exploring any such digital or tech in terms of any traceability for your sustainability performance?
Well, one of the things we do in how we measure where our cacao beans come from is we use satellite imagery. So you can easily tell where there's a forest or where it's been clear cut and there's just cacao plants. And so that's how we measure that, because we know where the farmers are located. And so we measure that using satellite imagery. And we're utilizing some AI tools to measure our waste output, because when we ship products, there's carbon emissions associated with that. There's shrink wrap around the pallet of product that's going to the retailer. And so we have an AI tool that takes all of that data, feeds it in, and tells us what our emissions are, what our plastic utilization is, and things of that nature, so that we know how to go attack those things. And we can go say, okay, here's the things we need to focus on and try to figure out how to reduce them.
Oh, that's impressive. So, what is your message for leaders trying to embed purpose into profit today?
I think you have to not undervalue your product. The one thing that I think impact-driven companies fall into a trap is that they say, oh, well, if I price my product at £5 or £3 and the competitors are only £2, I won't get any sales because the consumer only buys on price. And I don't think that's true anymore. I think the consumers are looking for transparency. So if your product really costs £3 to produce and you need to sell it for £5 to make a profit, then sell it for £5. Those consumers that are conscious enough to be focused on trying to do the right thing will buy the product. Don't undervalue your product. And if you don't undervalue it, you can make a profit. And if you can make a profit and you're having a positive impact on the world, you get to have that positive impact a much longer time if you're profitable. If you're not profitable, there's a finite window of how much you can operate until you're out of money.
I suppose if I might add that undervalue your product is reinforcing the earlier advice about making sure that, for example, in your instance, the taste is good. And once the consumer knows the taste is good, then by explaining the reasoning behind the higher price, then they will buy. So again,
That's
not
right.
compromising. Is that
That's
right?
right.
Yeah. Good, good, good. So, what is your final thought for the listeners who are perhaps curious to buy the next chocolate? What will be your final thought for the listeners or
Well,
those who are watching, actually?
I would say you as a consumer, you vote with your purchases. If you want to support a company that is truly trying to do everything the right way, be sustainable, be transparent in their supply chain and support the farmers in a right way, then you vote with your purchases. You know, we're always going to have the companies that shortcut some of the things, of conscious capitalism, but the consumer gets to make the choice at the end of the day. And if they support the companies that are doing the right things and trying to improve the environment for the next generation and the next generation, then that's going to help drive the growth of companies like Alter Eco, because we can only survive if the consumers understand the value that we're.
As someone who has explored, understood sustainability, yeah, the markers I've seen with Alter Eco and the key initiatives, the key certifications, as you've mentioned, the packaging, a whole lot is quite impressive. So, huge thank you to Keith for your time and the incredible insights that you've shared. Finally, if listeners want to find more of your work or more of the product, Alter Eco, where can they find you, please?
Well, so we're predominantly a U.S. Canadian based companies all throughout the natural channel. So in the Whole Foods and the Sprouts and natural grocers in the U.S., as well as a lot of the independents. In Canada, we're the same. There is an Alter Eco brand in the U.K. as well. It's owned by a French company. It was started at the same time and has all the same core principles. It's just different ownership. You can find that in the UK market. You can probably find it in Holland and Barrett and probably maybe Tesco. I'm not sure, but for Holland and Barrett and the natural channels for sure.
Is there any other message that you would like to leave with the listeners before we finish, Keith?
Well, I think, like I said, for those that are listening in the US, every time you buy an Alter Eco bar, you're getting the best tasting chocolate, and we say the cleanest, greenest snacks on earth.
That's great. All right. Thank you so much, Keith.
Thank you.